Hello, everybody. It's the Historical Gamer. You can call me Matt. And today, as always, I'm joined by Jean, the Strategy War Gamer. Today is episode 24 of the Single Malt Strategy podcast, and it's going to be a special one. We have an interview, which I don't want to spoil quite yet, but we have an interview with a developer for an upcoming strategy game that I know I've talked about. I know, Jean, you're really excited about as well. And we haven't done interviews on the Single Malt Strategy podcast in the past. I know, Jean, you've done a fair bit through sort of your War Gamer series. So you're the interview expert. I'm a bit of a novice here, but it's an exciting event for me to be able to have a developer on, and hopefully this is something that maybe we start doing a little bit more of on the channel as well.
A few more lined up, so yeah.
Well, then I look forward to it. It was a good time. It was really enjoyable. We actually recorded it a couple of weeks ago. Some real life stuff has sort of come up on both of our ends and kind of caused things to be delayed a bit. But nonetheless, just as topical as ever, and something that I think you guys will enjoy. But before we get to that, I did want to go ahead and just kind of check in with you, Jean, and see, first off, welcome back. Another great episode, hopefully, here today. But what have you been playing lately?
Well, the last couple of weeks have been a little crazy for me because I had a death in the family, so I haven't been kind of playing games as much, so I had to take care of that and drive up to Brooklyn back and forth numerous times. So yeah, that was something that I just came out of left field, but I kind of changed out my whole gear setup here. So I don't know if I mentioned this in the past with previous podcasts, but I had a 13-inch MacBook Pro, and I was gonna set up like an eGPU and then get another display to hook it up to, and I was just like, you know what? It's just way too much stuff. So I sold my MacBook Pro. I got my
Good decision.
Yeah, you're probably gonna hope that I said I switched to a nice tower, but yeah, I went to an iMac, a nice 5K, beautiful iMac 27-inch.
Where's my sad trombone music?
Go put it in the editing.
I mean, let's say if you want to spend $1,000 less and get the same performance, you could do that, but okay.
Well, I can tell you this one thing. Nothing beats this 5K display. Like, literally, when I turned it on, I had the 13-inch MacBook Pro, which has a Quad HD display. It's 2K. And then when I turned this on, I was just amazed how beautiful it was. And when I worked for Apple, I got to play with these a lot, and we had these all throughout the back and in the offices and all that. But it's been a couple of years, and just looking at it, it's absolutely beautiful. But one of the major things that this computer has an AMD 570 4 gig graphics card in it. And the first thing I wanted to get in was Battlestar Galactica, because they had the recent DLC that recently came out for it. I haven't been able to get to that because that death in the family happened, so I had to kind of like postpone it. But and recently, I think it was like a day or two ago, one of my buddies said, "Hey, listen, you're back. Let's start using your iMac." So the first game he suggested was Stellaris. So I got a little Stellaris action in. And I don't know if you played Stellaris, but I played a couple hours here and there. I wasn't too, I guess, not fixated, but impressed with the AI. The gameplay is really awesome. I do really like that. But the AI, I have some reservations. What are your thoughts on Stellaris before I jump a little bit further in?
Well, I've played a fair bit of Stellaris. I enjoy it. I think the exploration, the initial sort of getting your first colonies set up, that's where the game really is strong. I feel like the game loses me a little bit in the mid-game. I wish there was more inter-ship commerce. I understand from a presentation perspective maybe why they don't want to do it, but I think the game would really benefit from having like commercial shipping that you have to defend, because to me it feels like militaries are largely pointless other than fighting other countries, and they don't, or chasing down the occasional pirate. but I have no reason why I wouldn't just park my fleet in a given system and never move it. So I want it to feel more like a Navy, where maybe I would do freedom of navigation patrols through certain space near the edge of my controlled space, or maybe I'd set up patrols near the edge of my space near a bordering country, with the goal of protecting my commerce. I feel like the space exploration part in this game is really on point. The early game is on point, but I would like a little bit more life come from my colonies, from my kingdoms, rather than everything have to be me versus another colony out there. So to me, it feels a little bit thin in some ways, but overall, I enjoyed the game. I played a fair amount. I play a lot of new games. Again, I think the mid game usually loses me a bit, but I put a lot of hours into it, and there's really nothing like it, in my opinion, and I enjoy it quite a bit.
I agree with you. I think you're right. The mid game is it gets slowed down. I try to push a lot of times.
It just gets repetitive
to get to the end, because I heard the end game is like absolutely chaotic. It gets you on the tip of your toes, and it's just like it won't let you go. It's just crazy up. So I started this game, I think, a few days ago, and it was pretty awesome, because one of my buddies who's really into it, he talks about these fallen empires. I'm like, what are you talking about, fallen empires? It's like empires that existed for like thousands of years, and you're just this small young pup with these two big bulldogs next to you, and they're kind of like kind of napping. You don't want to screw with them, and eventually they will wake up, and they will kind of like go at each other, and if you're in the way, they're gonna eat you up. And it's probably a bad analogy, but in a way, he's basically saying, like, eventually the end game, these two empires wake up, and they basically give you kind of like, you're with us or against us. And obviously, if you're against them, you become the backlash of this monstrous empire that has technology that supersedes your own. The only problem that I had, and I do agree with you, the beginning of the game is awesome. When I started the game, I'm starting getting colonies, all these systems, grabbing them all up, building my fleet. And I noticed every AI country or whatever nation or whatever empire is doing the same thing. They're just snagging all these things. So it's a rush to gain as many systems as possible. The only problem is, as soon as it hits the mid game, everybody just stops. Like, every AI empire just stops expanding. It's literally, they decide, all right, yeah, we're going this far, no farther. And it just gets boring. I mean, literally decades pass. And then you start seeing the AI kind of start picking out one system every 5 to 10 years. And it gets so slow. And I was doing this multiplayer game with my buddy, and I was just like, dude, I am extremely bored. Like, I'm building my fleet up. There's one AI empire who keep threatening me, but he doesn't have any balls, because that's all he does is threaten me, make claims, and doesn't do anything. So I don't know. I'm at the point where I'm like, I need to push to get to the end game, but I don't know if you run into that, where it's just like everybody stops expanding, everybody stops being aggressive. It's just monotonous at the point.
I mean, I think in some sense you're expected to drive the activity yourself. I just wish there was more life within my empire, and more things to do with my navy, other than fight wars. I guess that's my view. I've heard good things about the late game. I really don't get to it generally, but it's a fun game that I enjoy playing with friends, sitting down for 5 or 6 hours, getting my empire set up, play the game, explore the world, and kind of go from there, and then usually start over next time around. So, to me, the real enjoyment factors in the early game, and things tail off a bit as I get to the mid game. But it's still, in my opinion, well worth what it is. It's well worth the investment for me, because I've got 50 plus hours in the game.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah.
Again, it's not, it's something, I think the beginning stages of that game are so well done that it's worth it. And I guess perhaps the weakness is I don't really care about seeing through to what happens at the end, because the mid game kind of loses me, so it's just kind of like whatever.
What do you think about the tech tree? So, because it's very different from the way Hearts of Iron, Victoria, and the rest of it is
I
worked
prefer
out.
the tech tree. I like the randomness aspect to it. One thing I do think they need to do a better job of making different ships matter. To me, it feels like there's really no reason never to just build the biggest, baddest ships you can. Different ship classes don't have unique elements to them that make them part of a wholly put together fleet. And I think if you gave your Navy more things to do, so like, for example, once I can build destroyers, why would I ever build another Corvette? There's really no reason to. All the ships are the same, except the bigger ones have more firepower. That's what it feels like. But if you could have Corvettes or some smaller ships would have unique abilities or uses, or maybe their speed and mobility makes them more effective against pirates or escorting commerce, which the game doesn't have commerce, which it doesn't have actual on map commerce, which is a big detriment in my opinion. But if maybe you had a convoy escort role, then you might build corvettes to patrol the corners of your empire. You might build them to patrol convoy routes, and then leave your capital ships at sort of a central location and kind of use them the way that some of the Roman auxilias were used, where the corvettes or the lighter ships are your auxiliaries on the periphery of the empire, and then when the enemy strikes, they fall back. The main field army, in the case of the heavy capital ships, goes forward. And then maybe corvettes can have also a different aspect of importance in the battles as far as scouting or other things like that. It just doesn't seem to me like different ship classes matter. And again, that takes a little bit of the depth away. But I do enjoy the tech tree.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, like the Corvettes, so basically, if you have like a massive fleet, because I'm not that far into the game, I guess, because all I've developed was destroyers and corvettes. So I'm assuming when you warp into a system, right, and you have battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and corvettes, they all move at the same speed, and none of them have any type of special features.
I mean, they have different weapons and different speeds, and they do have different speeds, but it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't play out in a.
So when I basically get a battleship or Battlestar, basically, there's no point in building destroyers or cruisers. Just build a whole set of battleships.
I mean, that's my experience, in my opinion, but maybe different, more advanced players have different strategies. I don't know.
Yeah, that's weird. I would think it would be similar to like World War II, where you have like the destroyers and cruisers kind of providing that like circle around your capital ship, of your aircraft carrier, so like your outer line and inner line of defense.
No, I mean it's more like it's more like Hearts of Iron or Europea Universalis and their combat methods. Battles don't go into that level of detail. Or at least they don't seem to play out in that level of detail. So, in that sense, it is what it is, and that's fine. It just, I have no real reason other than the fact that heavy ships cost more in naval upkeep. I have no real reason not to build anything unless it's the largest thing I can build.
Yeah, the one thing that the game did get a little bit juicy toward the end of our gaming session, because he got a declare of war from one of his neighbors, and the one thing I guess that I get a little bit not worried but would like to see added is like an intelligence system in the game. Like I'm facing a power that the only thing the diplomacy screen says is superior to me in terms of military. Like, okay, so I have about 3,000 2,000 points in terms of a fleet. What does superior mean versus me? So is that double? Is that triple? Like, I would love to send out agents to find out, okay, what kind of ships are they developing? I feel like there's no intelligence system in this game. Have you noticed any? Because I maybe I'm doing something wrong.
Not that I've noticed, really. Not within foreign, like, espionage doesn't really be a thing with no game type of espionage, so whatever. But I still think it'd be interesting if you had more options. the diplomacy, I think.
Yeah, I would love to, I don't know, do something different. Like, I don't know, employ really complex strategies. There's basically we have like I have a stalemate with the neighboring empire, and I always think of kind of doing a almost like Operation Barbarossa because I was sitting with my friend. I was like, you know what? I'm bored to death. I'm going to do an Operation Barbarossa. He's like, all right, what are you thinking? I said, well, I want to surprise the enemy where he's least expecting it. And, perhaps I can, set up something in a system 2, 3 down because their fleet's not near the border to kind of delay them so I can take the nearby system, like kind of they see me invading across. All right, we'll send our fleet. Oh, wait, what do you mean we can't send our fleet? Well, some thing in the system is prohibiting us to go into warp, something like that. But I haven't noticed anything like that. It seems to be more simplified in terms of combat and strategies and warfare.
I mean, I don't know. I enjoy the beginning of the game. I'm not looking for a Battlestar Galactica deadlock level of combat detail in this kind of a game. It's not that kind of a game. That's fine. I just wish there was more use of different types of ships, and I wish there was more depth in the commerce within your own kingdom, and or space empire, or whatever you want to call it. Other than that, I don't have a lot of complaints. I think both of those fixes would bring the mid game to life a lot more, and then obviously it brings into the late game, which is reported to have pretty good satisfaction from a lot of players with it.
So what have you been playing?
The games I've been playing, a couple of different ones. For one, I'm still playing through and will be for years to come, a War in the Pacific play-by-email game with Belugan from Belugan Campaign. He's a developer on the Warfare Sims team that makes Command Modern Air Naval Operations. He also had his own YouTube channel before he was doing that. But in addition to that, this has been a PVM that's been going for over a year now. So in addition to that game, I've been playing a little bit more Arms Race, the Cold War era, which I think is a game, if you haven't given a look, you would really enjoy. It is a Cold War strategy game that puts you in the shoes of either the USA or the Soviets, and you try and basically swing as many countries to your side, to your influence as possible, while accomplishing different objectives. So, for example, the easy level difficulty is winning the space race, which frankly is about more than just going to the moon. It's called Arms Race, the Cold War era. It does have some flaws as a game. It's not perfect. It's, I believe, done by 1 or 2 guys. It's kind of a shoestring budget game. But they got a couple of DLC packs that add different types of campaigns or victory conditions. And I don't know, I think it's a really interesting game. It certainly isn't a super historically accurate view of the Cold War. It simplifies things quite a bit. For example, all of basically Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, they're all one Indochina hex. And the way that some different events occur and they're locked into decades, like, it's not the most realistic Cold War game I've ever played, but it might be the most satisfying and interesting, and it's really easy to pick up and play. The manual's like 14 pages, but communicates everything it needs to. You can do things like try and turn countries' governments to your side. You can sort of start riots and revolutions in other countries. You can deploy military force, spies, diplomats. It's an interesting little game. It's not a super pretty game, but it's a game that you might find enjoyable given your nonstop desire to see a East versus West. This is probably the closest thing you've got to that.
Okay, I'm gonna have to take a look at that. Looking at the screenshots, it does look really interesting. The only other Cold War game I recently played was the why is my head blanking on this? It's the it's like card game. I forgot the name is escaping.
Twilight Struggle.
Yeah, that's the only game that I recently played, and I do like it. It's cool. I don't know. I'm kind of leaning. I want to deal with more like in terms of military units and Warsaw Pact and Korean conflict, and there's so many like I was discussing with today's Father's Day, so I was actually discussing with one of my not friends, but like one of my girlfriend's family members, and
Yeah, fuck that guy. He's no friend. I just know this dude. I don't know what you want.
we were discussing the Vietnam War, and he was talking about how we could have just easily went into North Vietnam, and like we would have won the war. And I said, I think there was a lot more to it than that. And he says, no, he says, if we would have just went into North Vietnam, we could have just won the war. It was crazy easy. You have these stupid idiots that are on the left that are ruining the country, and they ruined Vietnam. And I'm like, don't you think that if we went into North Vietnam, that like China would respond like they did so in Korea? Like there was a good possibility that could have happened, and Russia wouldn't have taken that lying down. They would have reacted, whether that be in Europe or. And he was just like, no, it would have been easy. We could have finished the war in '64. And I'm like, okay. So I would love to test some of these theories out. Obviously, these what if theories. Having a heart to iron game or stuff like that, it's not going to be the most accurate representation. But I would like to configure a game where what if we did invade North Vietnam? What would the AI do? Would that be something similar that China would do? Would Russia react? Where would they react? Where would U.S. resources be? Can U.S. respond with certain resources or be overwhelmed and have to end the war? I love answering these questions, and I want to find a game that lets me answer these questions.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is not that game. So if that's what you're looking for, Arms Race: The Cold War Era is not that game. I do agree with you. It's always fun to play through what ifs. I think the challenge with those kind of things is just to remember, obviously, that it's a game and it reflects the way that the war appeared to that developer, but not necessarily reality, right? Like what I think is reality may not necessarily match with what reality actually is. So there's always sort of that risk. But no, I mean I agree with you that to me that's always one of the intriguing pieces of playing these games. And Vietnam gets overlooked a bit, in these kind of games. It's not one of the games that everybody turns to, or genres that everybody turns to when they're looking at making a game. So I think there's a lot of rich potential there. There's a lot of board games out that deal with Vietnam, but not a lot of actual computer war games that deal with it. So I'd like to see more. I would definitely play them if they were available. But your not friend, I don't know if that's how I'm supposed to refer to them, does sound like they may benefit from a little bit more reading on the Vietnam War. I'm not going to say it was an unwinnable war, because I generally don't say any war is unwinnable. But it certainly, I think you put it well when you said it was a little bit more complicated than that. Would China have gotten involved? I don't know. I don't know if we know for sure. But whether China did or didn't, I think the war was a little more complex than just do this one thing and then everything falls into place.
Yeah, I mean, they did so in the Korean War, so I'm just thinking, what would stop them from doing it again?
I'm not disagreeing with you. They may well have gotten involved. I don't, I think it's hard for us to know for sure without that having occurred. Thank God it didn't, because anytime superpowers with nuclear weapons start shooting at each other, it makes me a little bit nervous. I will say, it sounds like I wonder if he's ever read a book called A Better War. It certainly doesn't promote the idea of an invasion of North Vietnam, but I've seen a lot of recent books come out that have kind of talked about Vietnam and what might have been able to be done differently. Louis Sorley, it's a really well-regarded book that sort of tells the story of Vietnam according to this author's perspective. He was a veteran as well. Certainly of the opinion that the U.S. could have won. But it's an interesting book, and it's an interesting topic. I think if you read that book with a critical eye, you'll see some places where maybe there's a little bit of wishful thinking, or a little bit of, this isn't totally realistic, or a little bit maybe more of, okay, yeah, you're right, but then what? But long story short, yeah, I wish there were more games that dealt with Vietnam. It would allow you to simulate those those kind of questions. And it's interesting that you had that discussion on Father's Day. But Arms Race, the Cold War era game I've been playing a fair bit of. Trying to think of anything else that I've been playing a lot of. Really, that's mostly it. I've been wanting to play a lot of games, but I just haven't been getting around to it. I've been doing more reading than I've been playing games lately. But that's kind of been the main one, and I think you should check it out. It doesn't really have the military aspect in that sense. It's highly abstract, but it's still an interesting quick play. You can play through a whole game in maybe 2 or 3 hours. So it's an easy thing to pick up and play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming it's less complicated than what do you call it? What was the game that we just mentioned? Twilight Struggle. Because Twilight Struggle took me a while to kind of like pick up.
To me, it's less complicated. Honestly, read the manual. It's like 12 pages. It doesn't, and it tells you what every screen is, how every button works, how the game works, and you take 20 minutes to read that, and this game is really easy. I don't normally read manuals for games, but I did struggle with some of like, what the hell am I doing? And it was written concisely and clearly enough and quickly enough that I spent like 15 minutes reading the thing. All right, I get all this. This makes sense.
Okay, I'm gonna have to pick that up. I put that on my Steam library here, so that's gonna be. I'm gonna have to put that in for the next week or two. I think that and Battlestar Galactica this week I'm gonna have to, because the one thing I've been dreaming of ever since I got this iMac is Battlestar Galactica, max everything up to max graphics, and shoot it out, because they just released a DLC for it, which is it's really cool. So I've been wanting to sink my teeth into that.
Well, maybe in our next episode you can report back on that. All right, everybody, it's been about 25 minutes, and I have tripped over my words 3 or 4 times figuring out how to segue us into our interview. But with that being said, that's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and talk about this strategy game. Let's go ahead and talk with this strategy developer. I know we've kept you in a little bit of suspense, but yeah, why don't we jump in?
Okay, welcome everyone. This is the Strategy Wargamer. I'm Gene. I'm here with Ilya, the designer of the Civil War 1861 to 1865 by the developer, The Grand Tactician. And I also have Matt joining me, the historical gamer, for this interview. Welcome both of you guys. How are you guys doing?
Hi, nice to be here, and doing just fine.
Hey everybody, thanks again for joining us for the interview, Ilya, and look forward to talking about your upcoming game, the Civil War, or the Grand Tactician, the Civil War.
Yeah, this is really awesome, because this game was just recently announced, and as soon as we saw it announced, we kind of like just jumped all over it, and I made sure to the head guys of this development studio on the horn, because the website where you guys posted all your screenshots and all the details about this game look incredible. So I'm thank you for doing this, and hopefully we can find out more about this game. And I guess we'll just dive right into the interview.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about the company, the origin story of the Grand Tactician? Is this your first title? Where did you guys come from?
Yeah, basically the story starts with Oliver Keppelmüller, who is our coder. He created this game called The 7 Years' War alone, and it was released in 2015, late year. And when I found about the game, I was sort of blown away that something like this was created by one guy, and I contacted Oliver and offered to help. And after that, post-release, we improved the 7 Years' War game, and also, I helped to design one of the DLCs, the Pomeranian War, for that. So that's how we started up. And after the 7 Years' War, we sort of started thinking about if we should make some sort of sequel or continue developing games. And then we came up with the idea of Grand Tactician and teamed up. This was in 2016 in the summer. And the third guy in our company, who is Peter, he joined later, and he does the art in our game.
Okay, so the previous game is called The 7 Years' War, and both you guys helped design it. And is there any influences of that game in the current game that you're developing?
Yeah, of course, it's a sort of base for us. It has a lot of cool details and mechanics the game, and we wanted to improve on that, but also to sort of create a completely new game. So we wouldn't call this 7 Years War 2 or something like that, but it's a completely new game and a new engine and new design.
Yeah, I managed to play that game recently, and I was really kind of blown away with this game. And the reason being is I kind of like I put it in my notes was kind of like if I feel like it's Rome Total War 2 meets Victoria. You know, it kind of combines both those elements, and I really did enjoy it. It's right now on Steam. So if anybody's interested, I would highly recommend to go pick up that game. It really, really impressed me on like even just a level of detail where I can sign unit commanders and division commanders, change out weaponry. I thought that was really sick.
Yeah, and all this done by a single guy, so awesome as well.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting how like Paradox has like entire teams making like Victoria and Hearts of Iron. You had this one guy, and then you came in during the development process where two guys made this one game that rivals, you know, Victoria and stuff like that. I thought that was pretty sick.
Moving on a little bit, you know, the 7 Years War is really, I was kind of playing around with it over the last week or so, and I found it pretty interesting. But I'm curious for your upcoming game for the Grand Tactician, the American Civil War, how did you guys decide to do the Civil War? I mean, obviously it's, you know, musketry linear combat in the way that the 7 Years War was, but the American Civil War is, you know, a much... I don't know if I want to say narrower focus, but obviously it's, you know, it's the North versus the South in the United States. It's not this globe-spanning conflict in the same way. And, you know, I'm just kind of curious how you guys made the decision that you wanted to cover the American Civil War.
It's a long dream of Oliver to do a Civil War game. The main inspiration comes from Ken Burns' documentaries, the movie Gettysburg, and of course Sid Meier's Gettysburg, the game. And it's something that's very interesting to all of us. And also from the designing point of view, it's I think it's better to design a game that has a bit more narrow scope than sort of global conflict. So it's been a long dream for Oliver and also for myself to create a game about the Civil War.
Awesome. So you mentioned Sid Meier's Gettysburg in there. Can you talk a little bit about how the Grand Tactician is going to play? I mean, is this a strategic and a tactical game, or just kind of maybe a 20,000-foot view if someone's never heard of the Grand Tactician, the American Civil War, and what's coming? What's your sort of initial elevator pitch before we dive into it?
Well, most people are, especially strategy gamers, are they know Total War game series, for example. And if you look at our game, you would probably think that it's pretty similar. So it will have a sort of grand strategic layer where you play around in the campaign map, and then you zoom into the battles. A bit similar way as Total War, but I think our focus is a bit different. So we try to keep it a bit more realistic and also try to add some more depth into the game.
One question I did have was in terms of like the actual strategic and the tactical combat, how does those two systems work together in tandem?
So the idea of the campaign layer is, of course, to generate these battles, and we try to add this sort of operational or grand tactical level to it. So when you move around your units or armies and corps on the map, a bit similar way that you would think, for example, in the Ageod title, when the armies meet, it will generate a battle from that situation. So the composition of the armies and where they are situated on the map and the direction they are arriving on the battlefield and the timing, all that is taken into account, and we're trying to achieve this sort of operational view on it.
Okay.
Of course, when the battle ends, everything that's happened on the battlefield will be coming back on the campaign side. Not only that you lose some troops and maybe lose some ground, but it will have the battle will have a larger meaning, for example, for the nation morale and the ability to continue the campaign and waging war. So maybe even if you win a battle or get a sort of draw, it could mean that you need to anyway pull back and regroup. So we try to go a bit deeper there as well.
Okay, wow, that's pretty cool. Kind of curious in terms of like, how did you model the campaign of the American Civil War? Or do you have like start points from like 1861, 1863, 1865, like the final years? How did you guys model that?
Yeah, we're planning on having multiple scenarios with the different starting dates. So basically, you can dive in from the start of the war, or maybe a bit later when the situation has already developed into something historical.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of like the end of the war. I always wanted to like, command a Confederate army in the last couple of weeks to see if I can like break out and try to meet up with Joe Johnston. So that's probably one thing I'm going to try out in your game.
Okay, sounds good.
So I think it's a really interesting idea, and I think you mentioned Ajod's title, which is more of a kind of strategy game where you don't actually fight the battles directly. You kind of move armies around, and then the engagements are simulated. And then you've got other games out there that are like Ultimate General or Scourge of War, where you fight the battle on the tactical map. So it's pretty clear here that you're going to be moving armies around on a strategic map of the United States, and correct me if I'm making invalid assumptions. And then the armies will meet, and then you'll fight a battle on a tactical battlefield, and those results will influence the sort of the strategic layer of things. Does that mean, and I know you guys are still in development, so if there are things you can't say, that's fine. But does that mean that you guys are going to be modeling other factors as well, like supply lines, politics? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're going to do a sort of full-fledged campaign. So not only moving armies like some sort of pieces on a map, but for example, as you mentioned, there will be stimulation for supplies and also some sort of political and economical side for the campaign. If you have played around with the 7 Years' War, there's a lot of these elements also in that campaign. So we are trying to improve those for the Grand Tactician.
And the battles being resolved, are those being fought in real time, or is the campaign map being fought in real time? Is this, I know the actual website, you do say that it's a real time campaign. I'm just wondering if that's any different between the strategic layer and the battlefield layer.
Yeah, both layers will be played in real time, and yes, the tactical battles will be real time and fought on the actual battlefield.
You were mentioning that the website was mentioning that there's supply lines, blockade running, real-time campaigning. Does that mean that there's going to be like a grand strategy map? And if so, how large would that, like, is it going to encompass parts of Europe? How deeper into the West does it also go?
The campaign map is not yet implemented, but we are going to have all the American Civil War theaters, the Eastern and the Western there. So, and of course, the European nations will play a role, not as a sort of playable maps where you can move your troops around, but they will influence the Civil War nevertheless.
Okay, great. In terms of when you're fighting on the tactical map, does the terrain as well as weather have an impact? Because obviously in the Civil War or any type of combat, both those factors are key in battle.
About the use of terrain, yes, correct. So we do have weather simulated, and it will play a role in the battle. And terrain, if you compare to other similar games, I think we have sort of more connection with the terrain. So there will be, for example, fences and walls that can be used as cover for the troops, and they will automatically deploy on these features. Same goes with the heights. So basically, when you order the troops to take a high ground, they will find the best position there. So also the elevation on the tactical map. If you're on the high ground, you can of course see better, and you can, for example, reach farther with your artillery and stuff like that.
Okay, so I can get like a Fredericksburg thing kind of going on there, right? So I could put guys behind a wall and maybe like the Union can try to charge it and such.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty awesome. Get the old 6th, 9th Infantry up in there.
Yes.
So that's pretty awesome. The I guess since we asked the weather question, tactical combat, will there be seasons in the game?
Yes.
Okay, nice. So like we'll get a weather and kind of like a summer, and I'm assuming there'll be penalties and stuff like that regarding them.
Yeah, there will be in the, for example, troop movement and fatigue on the troops, stuff like that. And also very nice little details, such as if it's very dry weather, there will be a lot of dust and smoke that lingers on the battlefield, so it will also make it harder to see for the troops.
Okay, so like, would it be harder to see for us or for like the actual troops? So, like for example, if troops are in combat and there's smoke all around them, would they accidentally like not be able to hit the enemy?
Yeah, they will be having a hard time hitting the enemy, so
Wow.
firing in the smoke and not seeing much.
Wow, that's really awesome. I mean, because that's an incredible historical aspect. I don't think any games that I know of that do that, where they instill in that type of like fog of war.
Yeah, thinking about it, I can't find many, at least real-time games where that has been taken into account. So we think it's a cool little feature that has already been implemented. So
factoring in, effectiveness on the battlefield and how smoke and height and terrain, those all play a role in combat. I think I saw in some of your screenshots, it looks like there's different types of armaments as well for the different units.
Yeah.
So will I have to make decisions around how I equip those troops, or are they just going to kind of be self-equipped based on, I don't know, some factors, or like is there this whole sort of background logistical piece that I have to manage as well as a general?
For the battles themselves, for example, historical battles, you can play. These are preset for the weapons, so you cannot change them. But on the campaign layer, the idea is that you will have some sort of supply of weapons, certain types, and you can, of course, manufacture those or buy from other countries, and then you will equip your troops with these weapons. And in the Civil War, there was, for example, for the South, the lack of sort of industry to build these weapons was one of the key issues. For example, why they had inferior weapons if you compare it to the North. So that's something we are trying to achieve here as well.
That's pretty cool. That reminds me of this old, I think, 1990s game that I'm thinking of called The American Civil War, Fort Sumter to Appomattox. And I think one of my favorite things there is the Confederates was trying to like race ships in and out of the blockade so I could import weapons, so I was able to equip my troops with, effective weaponry.
Yeah, something like that.
That's really exciting to hear. Can you talk, you're mentioning the historical battles as well, so if I don't want to play a campaign, then I'll just be able to play tactical historical battles as well?
Yes, that's correct.
One question that I wanted to ask is, in terms of the order of battle, will I be able to kind of like assign like Stonewall Jackson to command a division or a corps or even his own army? How much like leeway do we have in terms of assigning commanders to the order of battle?
Yeah, that's a campaign feature. So during the campaign, you will have a large number of the historical commanders available, and they will also advance and develop during the game. So basically, you can assign your commanders to any posts you like. Of course, there's a requirement that they have high enough rank or enough experience for that job. But anyway, you will manage the sort of officer corps and assign them to command, and also you can influence the order of battle. For example, where the brigades, in which divisions they are, and throw division from a corps to corps and stuff like that.
Oh wow, okay. So like the smallest unit game would be a division or a brigade?
The engine at the moment it's quite flexible, so it can handle a lot of levels. But as you can see from the screenshots, we have added on the website. The main sort of main unit is infantry brigade. That's at the moment the level we're using.
And you also mentioned that, like, on the website, that you're going to incorporate battle footage from the Lionheart Filmworks, which is a really awesome film publisher because they have some really incredible films.
That's true.
So I was kind of curious how you plan to include this into the game. Is it going to be kind of like a Civil War Generals 2 kind of thing where, like, you two brigades clash and then there's going to be like a little mini movie and then the results?
It will not be like that. So, for example, during combat, if you have played a game called Cossacks 2, I think they incorporated some sort of a Napoleonic reenactment footage. So, for example, when you changed formation or stuff like that, it showed a sort of little screen with the video. We're not going that way, but we are going to use the video to carry the story in the campaign. So, sort of cutscenes and background stuff.
And that all takes place outside of the tactical battlefield, so it's on the strategic map?
Yeah, on the tactical battlefields, you will not during the fighting, you will not see these small snippets of, for example, a unit firing or stuff like that.
Going back to the tactical map, how does a player win the battle? Like, are there going to be, when a battle launches, are there going to be assigned objectives that I need to take?
Yeah, on the battlefield, you will have a number of objectives, of course. And I think difference to other, or at least most other games, is that you most likely will not have your whole army or all your troops starting the battle on the battle map, but we have this entry point system where they could be called, for example, lines of operations. So you will receive reinforcements, the troops that are marching to the battle, and these troops arrive via these entry points, and these entry points can also be captured, so it will prevent that line of operation from the enemy. So basically the troop needs to be diverted, and this takes time again. But so there will be objectives which you need to take, then there will be these entry points, and of course there will be the sort of morale and casualty factor. So if you beat the enemy army bad enough and their morale will will break, then of course it will win the battle for you even without taking all the battlefield objectives.
Oh, okay, nice. I love that.
So one of the things that I think is interesting on the website and the feature list is it's talking about the morale of your citizens at home, the morale of your troops. So as a battle, as you win a battle or lose a battle and your morale for your troops drops, do those units' morale carry over fight to fight or throughout the course of the campaign? And or is that sort of your morale is whatever it is as you enter a battle and then it's kind of thrown out at the end of a fight?
It will be sort of carryover from campaign to battles and battles to campaigns. So it should be a major factor, and not only the morale of the troops, of course, but also the home front, which is of course supporting. And if the morale goes down, you could assume that, for example, it's harder to get volunteers to fight for your cause and stuff like that.
So we can South Scream basically, like Sherman did, or howl. I think he used the word. We'll make the South howl or something like that, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, nice.
For sort of key points for us, that the campaign side should not be just something to get your battles running and to win the war by simply steamrolling the other side and winning a lot of small battles. But we like to integrate this into sort of operational or grand tactical, like they said at the time, situation where not only the battles count, but also the strategic side. So basically, you could win the war without winning all the battles or taking all the all the states from the other guy, because that's how the real wars work as well.
Yeah, hearing you talk about it's kind of making me think. I'm actually in the middle of reading A Silence at Appomattox by Bruce Canton, and it's kind of making me think to the passages in there where it's talking about the army and how it changes over time, and The influx of draftees causes the overall quality to drop, but then also, the Wilderness wasn't a tactical victory by the Union whatsoever, but morale increases because, they decide to continue fighting afterwards. So it's just hearing you talk about as the campaign unfolds is really interesting, and I'm excited to see how you guys will kind of have that play out. And I think that is one of the most unique pieces that you're talking about is just that interaction between the campaign and the battlefield. Because so many Civil War games either cover the tactical side or they cover the strategic side, but there really aren't many, certainly not recently, Civil War games that kind of do both.
Yeah, we fully agree with that, because that's the reason we are doing this game. It would be, I think, foolish to try to challenge a game like Ultimate General alone in that field, or for example on a campaign map, the AGO titles. But I think this is something that hasn't been done recently, and I think this will make our game unique.
Yeah, I'm thinking back. I think there were a couple way back, like in the 90s, either like the Blue and the Gray, or there's an Empire Civil War game that kind of had that. But we're talking like early Windows days, no real sprite animations or anything like that.
Yeah, good old days.
One question, since we were talking about the campaign, I wanted to dive into naval battles, because naval battles are a key element of the Civil War because of the Anaconda Plan. How will the game handle naval battles and the Anaconda Plan?
The naval combat will be on the campaign layer, and it will be sort of auto-resolved along with time, a bit similar way as there's the 7 Years War handles it. So we will not have sort of like in Empire Total War complete layer for naval combat. These naval battles will of course allow you to blockade and to move troops and stuff like that. So the Anaconda Plan is something that you can actually try in the campaign to achieve what you're trying as the North. And why not as the South if you have the ships to do it?
In terms of the strategic map, kind of curious, I know you were mentioning the tactical combat is real time. In the strategic map, is it, how does that work? Is it like daily? Is it weekly, monthly?
It will be real time as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because we think that if we go to, for example, WeGo or turn-based, it will simplify the operational side a bit too much. So it will make things a bit too easy on one side and unrealistic on the other side. So when we are talking about real time, I would like to make sure that the listener understands that the real time we are using is more close to the actual real time than what you think about real time games usually. So it will be quite slow paced game. You can accelerate the time, you can pause the time, and you will not be in a hurry sort of doing the decisions on the campaign map. But when you get your troops moving, it will happen in real time. So there will be the need to actual coordination. That is one of the key factors of the battles that time. And usually that was the thing that switched the balance from side to side, because the other side didn't fully get their troops into this battle like they wanted, and the other side gets sort of advantage for a short period of time, stuff like that.
So we were talking about the naval combat and Anaconda Plan. Is there a possibility that like England or France gets involved in the war and we have a much more greater naval threat there?
Yes, that's one possibility, like it historically was.
Okay, nice. I really love that. And there's also, considering that that's the Navy aspect, I'm assuming there's a possibility that if I'm playing the Union there might be a couple of British armies coming from the north.
Yeah. This is not fully implemented yet, or sort of fully fleshed out yet, but that's one of the points we also reveal on the website, that yes, there will be a possibility that the foreign powers from Europe get involved. And yes, we want to also bring this to the campaign map and also possibly even to the battle maps.
You just want to try and burn Washington down again, don't you, Jane?
Redo an 1815.
Yeah.
Oh, the biggest one that we might have covered it, but supply lines. I know supply is huge in the American Civil War because Jackson was a big fanatic of, cutting the supply lines, and, you could bring a large army to its knees, and he did that repeatedly. Is there a possibility that I can sever or cut off, or how does the supply system work?
I won't go too much into the details, but the idea is that, of course, the armies will require a huge amount of both food and, of course, ammunition. And this is carried to the armies using these supply routes from depots. And also the armies will carry their own supplies in supply trains. So basically, yes, the supply system of the enemy will be, of course, a possible target for your countermeasures.
Oh, wow.
On the campaign map.
I would love to actually try to implement a strategy like that, which would be cool.
Well, you can do that, and then your opponent will maybe forage or whatnot, and just march through the south anyway.
It sounds like you're already countering my moves there.
Speaking of that, do you guys have any ambitions for any kind of multiplayer for this game, or is it going to be principally a single-player game?
Yeah, sorry about that. A bit under the weather at the moment, but yeah, we are doing this currently as a single-player game. We have discussed about the multiplayer possibility, but this will not be possible at the release. So maybe sometimes afterwards, because first of all, we don't have any experience in making a multiplayer game, and of course, a game of this scope, turning it into a multiplayer game, it will have a lot of stuff to do. You can take, for example, a look at how it worked out for Total War. When they first implemented multiplayer, it was not sort of an easy task for them either. And if you compare to us, a couple of guys doing this independently, so you have to think about the resources as well. But that being said, multiplayer would be something that we would be interested in doing, but not for the release.
Okay, awesome.
You were mentioning that before that there's going to be there's a possibility of European intervention. In terms of victories, is it possible, like if I'm, let's say, playing the South, that there are different paths to victory, whether that be political European intervention or me just conquering Washington, D.C.? Are there different paths, or do I have to destroy his Union army?
Yeah, you will have different paths to the victory, possibly not in a similar way as you would think, for example, in a game like Civilization, where you have the science victories and political victories, stuff like that. So for example, winning the war by not having the war at all will not be in our scope. But yeah, during the war there will be possibilities to win it differently.
Wow. I guess that's all my questions for the campaign and battles. Matt, do you have any ones that you want to add in?
No, I mean, and I'm not certainly going to hold you to this. Do you guys have any ideas when we should expect this? Is this 2018, 2019, 2020? Or I figure you guys have some sense given you announced the game, but I'm just kind of curious when we're going to be able to dive into this.
Yeah, we are aiming for 2019. So,
okay. Put on your wish list there.
A lot of work from our side, but that's what we're trying.
Awesome.
Since we're talking about release date and such, I wanted to ask, you guys are selling through Steam. Are there any alternate channels that you're going to pursue besides Steam?
Yeah, currently we are planning on releasing on Steam, and the other platforms we haven't looked into those yet. So not planned at this moment. For example, what Steam delivers pretty well is the sort of update platform, so the game is always up to date. Okay. And we're also planning on adding more stuff to the game post-release, so Steam will be very good for that. But I'm not ruling out other platforms, but those are not planned in yet.
In terms of like platforms, do you guys? I know you're going to probably do Windows PC. This is probably where you guys primary your focus is going to be. But do you see platforms like possibly Mac, Linux, or even like the mobile platforms like iOS and Android? Because I know the historical gamer gets on me for this all the time. But I love playing gaming on my iPad or iPhone.
Yeah, we have nothing planned there yet, but currently we're developing it for PC and Windows. Yeah.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Awesome. Well, Ilya, thanks for spending some time with us to answer some questions. Is there anything we didn't ask that we should have that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think we've covered all those. Something I think is something we're trying to achieve with our game is to sort of deliver the story of the war. So it's for us, it's not only about creating an engine to play out battles or move troops around on the map, but we also try to achieve the sort of Civil War feel. And for that, we're using, for example, the Lionheart Filmworks videos, very, very high quality videos to sort of show what the Civil War would have looked like. And also we have a original soundtrack coming, and we're trying to use a lot of sort of historical references on the art of the game. So that's something that we're trying to incorporate into the game, and not only in the looks and feel, but also how the game will play. For example, the campaign. And that's something that's important for us because, for example, if you watch the Ken Burns documentary, it's the storyline there it's very well done, and it's sort of sucks you into the Civil War like no other document does. So that's something what we are interested in.
Is there a possibility in the future, since you're mentioning 2019 as a possible release date, that there might be a possible Kickstarter? Could that be a possibility?
Yeah, I think quite many people has already asked about, for example, if we do a Kickstarter or stuff like that. But currently we don't have anything like that planned. I think from our point of view, most sort of big issue for us is the time, because we all have our day jobs and families, so it's the lack of time we're fighting against mostly.
Yeah, because I would really love to get in on a Kickstarter and see what little knickknacks that you add in, maybe like a historical figure of Lee or something. I don't know, anything. I'm big into Kickstarters.
Yeah.
Well, Ilya,
that's a possibility later, but we haven't discussed anything about this yet.
Okay, cool.
All right. Ilya, I want to thank you very much for coming on and sharing information about your upcoming game. I know we're all looking forward to learning more and seeing more as you guys move down the development path. Is there anywhere that you want us to direct anyone when, anyone who's listening and is interested in learning more? Where should they go?
I think the website should be a good place to go, and there especially the dispatches section, which is basically our developers blog, and we will add details of the game as it develops, and we try to be quite open about the information we are giving, so sort of give interesting information for anyone who is interested in the game or in the era of the Civil War.
Okay, awesome. So that's www.grandtactician.com, and the dispatches section is kind of where you would direct people to go to learn a little bit more. Looks like you guys have some FAQs in there, as well as almost like a kind of a dev blog type of a deal, which I'm assuming will actually, you've already got quite a few entries in here, but it looks like you enter entries pretty frequently in there.
Yeah, we have been trying to do at least a monthly update on there, and always revealing something new about the game that hopefully is interesting for the possible gamers in the future.
Awesome. Well, we'll put the link to the site in the description of the podcast, and I want to thank you guys for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was my pleasure, and very nice to see people interested about our coming game.
Yeah, there was actually, I posted sort of a video when I saw that you guys had announced the game, and it got quite a bit of traction. So I think there's a lot of interest. I think the fact that you guys are kind of trying to merge the strategic and tactical side is, as you've called out, and I've mentioned, I think it's unique, and I think it's something that a lot of people are looking forward to.
Yeah, hopefully that's the plan.
Awesome. Thanks for everyone joining us, and I'm going to head back to the podcast, and we'll catch you guys on the other side.
All right, and we're back here. We've just concluded the interview with Ilya from the Grand Tactician, the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. The first interview for the Single Malt Strategy podcast is in the books. Thank you very much for setting all of that up, John. I think it was illuminating and exciting to hear some of the things that we heard about this upcoming game.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an incredible Civil War game. I think, honestly, like I said in an interview, I think this is going to become the best Civil War game, strategy game ever made. And I have all my hopes.
Dear God, can you set your heights any higher?
Well, honestly, like when he was talking about the supply system and saying how armies need food, ammunition, and that the key phrase, I can cut off supply to an army, whether that be on the tactical map or the campaign map, that because I want to do a Stonewall Jackson. I want to do I want to do a Stonewall Jackson. I want to cut the enemy off from their base of supply, because Jackson literally trumped numerous U.S. field armies by just threatening their supply. And he did a bunch of other things, but supply was critical in a lot of his campaigns. And
just better hope that you're not facing the Union version of the Honey Badger. William Tecumseh Sherman, man, he'll just be like, I don't need any supply lines. Look at all these wheat fields over here. They got plenty of food in them.
Then you know what? That's a good point. Then you know what I would do? I would hope they put in a scorched earth policy, because I'm like, oh yeah, so you're gonna live off the land? I just burn the whole freaking thing down. I'm like, try to live off the land now, buddy.
I have a feeling this game will make you howl. Much like Georgia did. But with that being said, I'm making fun of you for saying the best Civil War game of all time, because that might be setting heights a little bit high at this point for what we know. But I will say that I likewise, and I think it came off in the interview as well, perhaps a little bit of fanboying, a little too much perhaps. But I'm blown away by what they're talking about. I think it'll be interesting to see how well they're able to execute on it. If they can execute effectively, this could be a phenomenal game, and I'm really excited about it. I, like you, the supply system, the politics, sort of the alluding to the political nature of the war, the home front, the way that morale and recruits will sort of interact and interface with each other. There's just a lot. Like, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned during the interview, and if not, I've just concluded Bruce Canton's 3-volume history of the Army of the Potomac. And I remember when we were conducting the interview, I was thinking, like, this is what I read about. Like, I feel like you're actually authentically looking at some of the history, and it's not just gameplay mechanics, but they tie back in a holistic way, not just in a right flank, left flank, not just in the theaters and the figures were right. It felt to me like it was this holistic approach that was bringing together the home front politics with even the enlistment politics on whether it's a draftee or a bounty soldier. Like, the fact that they were including that level of detail in this is just, it makes me on one end a little bit uneasy, because it's like there's a lot here that you're biting off. I hope it's not more than you can chew. On the other hand, it's like, holy crap, this could really be this epic strategy game. But in addition to like what AJOD has, there will be a tactical element. I think this is really exciting, and I know Ilya kind of talked about how, and they've posted in their blog, they've looked at games like Ultimate General Civil War, Scourge of War, the AJOD games. They've done their homework to understand what's out there, what works, what doesn't. So if anybody seems prepared to deliver a gem, it seems like these guys. But I think flip side of that, game does come, or when we do start to learn more about it, got to rein ourselves in, got to rein myself in to make sure that is this really delivering on what we hope it is? Let's temper our expectations a little bit, because I want it to be great. I know you want it to be great, but there's a lot here. And frankly, we're a long ways away from knowing if they're going to be able to do anything near what they said they're going to try and do. So there's a long road from here to there, and it'll be interesting to see what comes of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm very motivated for it. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm setting my sights very high, and that's mainly because they said everything I wanted to hear. Now,
the best game of all time.
Dun dun dun. I just I want to give them the support, and I want the community to kind of like look at this game and promote it and give them the support, because I feel like based on their intent for this game, if they get the proper support, they can get the proper money, great Kickstarter, great funding, they can make it a reality.
Are they doing a Kickstarter?
I think he mentioned that it's a possibility that they haven't decided yet.
Okay. So
I have to go through the interview. So, but I remember something like they were considering it. They haven't made a definite. They said possibly down the road.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, just then I'd say let's be clear. I don't think they've said that they're doing that. I don't really care if they do that or not. They'll get their money however they need to get it. I think it's just more, we'll see what they do, right? Like we'll see how they're able to wrap this all up and bring this all together.
And I think like one other thing is that's awesome is like I played Civil War 2, and that's my favorite Civil War strategy game ever made currently, and that's because it's so addicting. It's all strategic. There's no tactical elements besides two armies smashing into each other and kind of going back and forth. This game will have a tactical element to it, and I do really love the supply issue. They posted on June 7th, which is about like a week and a half ago, a blog says the bloody day ends, and they basically just go deeper into the supply system, saying that units will have lines of communication that will be resupplied with ammunition and food, provisions for men, and forage for horses. The amount depends on available supply, distance, and also the commander's administrative capabilities, which I thought was awesome when they mentioned that, because that's a lot of detail. Like, they're going to have to make every commander and say, all right, this is his administrative details, and apply that to other key facets of the game. Cut-off troops will not be able to receive any supplies, and this may cause problems with morale and condition of troops on the long run, in addition to not having more ammunition to fight with. I think this is like amazing because, imagine you cut off an entire division at the Battle of Gettysburg or Manassas or wherever you're fighting. You cut them off, you surround them, and you destroy them. That can change the nature of a whole battle. And there were so many games where I did similar things, and I'm always hoping I'm hoping the developers thought, hey, if this unit is completely cut off from their base of supply, that they're not going to be able to fight for too much longer because ammunition as well as morale and numerous other issues. No, numerous games that I've played where it's just like they're surrounded and they have unlimited supply or unlimited amount of ammunition. Their morale is still high, and it's just like, this is totally unrealistic. I surrounded them.
Well, you forgot to take out their LZs, and they were able to, bring in some supplies via the helicopters.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot they got that first cab waiting for helping them out. Little Hal Moore action going on.
Yeah, exactly. Look out for the B-52s. They might be coming in your rear a bit.
That'd be a really, somebody should make a movie like that, combining like the Civil War battle with a modern day battle. And they're like, yeah, we're going to be dropping, and you have a Civil War commander taking out like a surface, radio, and be like, yeah, you could drop it now, and have kind of like a sitcom kind of thing going on there.
Well, there was a Civil War game along those lines. It was Gettysburg Armored Warfare.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you mentioned that game. Holy shit.
I think that's a game that Paradox is like completely, it doesn't exist anymore. It's got a 2 out of 10 rating on IGN, a 22% score on Metacritic. I think they pulled it from Steam. That was back before Paradox got their act together, and it was just an abysmal train wreck of a game. Granted, they were the publishers, but I think that was back like when I don't think they...
I don't know how they thought that was a good idea. Like, I even posted on the forums, like, are you guys seriously serious about this? They were like, yeah, we think this is going to be a good game. I'm like, no.
I mean, the concept sounds awesome, but the execution left a little bit to be desired.
But, like, armor in the Civil War, like, that wasn't even...
No, that's not my issue. It was just a bad game. I love these screenshots of like there's a 12-pound smoothbore, and then behind it there's what looks like an M1 tank. It's just like, this is awesome. This should have been such a great game, and it was like this buggy piece of trash that just didn't play right.
But I don't understand the historical concept of that. Like, how would you even fit that into, like, you know, like, there's a story in the Civil War, like Battle of Gettysburg. There's a story in there. There's a story of, like, the American Revolution. How do you fit this, like, oh, by the way, instead of of the U.S. Army and the Confederate Army with soldiers, we're going to do it with tanks. And it's just like, well, this is not real. And they're like, yes, it's not real, but we're doing it anyway. It's just like,
this screenshot is so awesome. It's like Confederate artillery batteries behind this like old rail fence, like these 155 cannons just pointed up at the sky like it's a Vietnam artillery barrage or something like that.
Jeez, I didn't even buy that. I refused to even like touch that game after. Oh gosh, I'm looking at it here. It looks so.
A guy with a musket and old-timey Civil War clothing next to a tank. This is just awesome. This should have been good. Like, how did they not make this game work?
Oh man, it looks so. I don't know. It's like a mix between like the U.S. Civil War, World War I, and something from like the 22nd century. Like you have a U.S. I'm guessing vehicle, and it's U.S. Civil War flag on a vehicle that's from like Avatar, like one of those freaking vehicles from Avatar with like a Gatling gun on the top. Which is,
I mean, the thing that we also need to remember is this game was mainstream. Angry Joe did a preview of it. Total Biscuit did like a first look of it. Like this game was out there in sort of the mainstream ether. It was just a terrible game. Which
I'm assuming he probably gave a bad review for it.
I don't know. I saw the clip of him doing a preview. I'm not watching it right now, but it just I'm sorry, but seeing these like 50 Yankees coming forward at me with machine guns and Gatling guns and exosuits with these like flying blimps in the back. Oh man, how the fuck did they mess this thing up?
Yeah, I could say the same thing about East vs. West, but
I mean that game never came out. So.
Well, you know, it didn't. However, I did get my hands on the beta copy. Because it's kind of leaking through the internet. It goes on the site and it comes down. I downloaded a copy. I probably shouldn't have said that. Paradox, I do not own a copy of it. Don't come after me, my friend.
Certainly don't own. Thievery involved.
No, it was on a forums, and
I was on the internet. It must be fine.
Internet, there's nothing wrong with downloading stuff off the internet. People never got hurt from that.
And now episode 25 of the Single Malt Dark Web Strategy Podcast.
Tina's in jail. He's doing this from the local county jail.
Anyway, so we're rambling now. Good interview with the Grand Tactician, Ilya. Again, thank you for coming on, and look forward to hopefully, getting another interview or two going. I know you said you had a few lined up there, Jean. One thing I really regret that we didn't ask, and that we'll need to ask all of our future guests, is what your alcoholic beverage of choice is. This is, after all, the Single Malt Strategy Podcast. So I feel like that would be a good question to ask these different developers. With that being said, we didn't ask Ilya, but I can tell you that I am drinking a rose. I don't even know if it's a rosé. Actually, it's a Lambrusca, which is sort of like a carbonated sweet red wine. I'm not drinking, I feel like I've fallen a little bit far from the single malt tree. I know that was sort of the first 12 to 15 episodes. I think I drank that every episode, but lately I've been drinking other things, but just kind of a casual sweet red wine, and been enjoying it quite a bit. It's called Rianiti. It's a cheap thing. It's like a liter is like $7. So a cheap red wine, but it's actually pretty good. What about you, Jean? Anything for the Father's Day holiday that you were out there drinking?
No, they didn't have anything special. It was just soda and stuff like that. But I stick to my regular stuff from at home. Every time I go out and I'm like, I need to get something different, I never get anything different. I usually go into Harrison Teeter or the local liquor store, and I'm like, you know what? I could really go for a nice cold beer, and I don't know what it is. I always go for the same old El Guapo, and I need to switch it out. I need to kind of try different things, but I go through phases. Like there'll be like half a year where I'll try a different beer, or even like I'll even go into scotch. I had a scotch phase like a few months ago where I was just drinking scotch at the bar, which, by the way, I think I'm probably mentioned this before. Do not drink scotch at the bar, especially expensive scotch at the bar, because you're going to get on a roll, and before you know it, the bill is going to be closer to like $150, $200, and you're going to be like, this is not mine. This cannot be mine.
Well, especially if you're drinking like Glenlivet, like you were talking about, where it's like you can buy that bottle for like $30 or like $40. It's
it was a bad decision. But it was a bad decision.
I mean, hey, you enjoy the scotch. It was good scotch, so
Plus, I was watching it next, so it just works.
What's good about that?
I think they won that night, though.
Oh, worst draft pick. They hurt their draft pick.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. They just had the draft, right?
I don't know. It seems to be in modern sports, if your team is bad, you want them to be really bad.
Well, yeah, because they get the better draft pick. But honestly, I'm just so fed up with the way the whole NBA turned out. Like bloody freak. I thought Boston was going to get to the end this time, but it's the same old teams every year. And I'm just like, I was going to watch the finals this year. I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm glad though that LeBron broke his hand. Too bad he didn't break it. His hand, his neck, and everything else. And
God,
for all you LeBron lovers, yes, I understand you're a fan of him, but he's always going to be a wannabe Jordan. It's all he will ever be. I'm just going to put that out there.
Okay, well, didn't know you had such strong sports ball feelings. Yeah. This has been an interesting podcast, I will say. The interview went smoothly. That went well. The wrap-up afterwards has devolved into you claiming a game is going to be the greatest game of all time, when is probably a ways away from coming out. That was okay. That was reasonable. But then you followed that up with dark web game stuff, and now you're wishing physical injury upon LeBron James. Not just physical injury, but I think injury that would maim him for life. So, yeah. On that cheerful note, I hope that no one breaks all of their limbs. No one breaks their hands, their legs, or their chest. I will leave you with the fact that I do think LeBron James is one of the greatest basketball players at all time. I do not think that he is a wannabe Jordan. But that is for another podcast, Jean. I think that is for the Single Malt Sports podcast. I guess we need to have a follow-up with that.
That sounds good. I'll prepare my my vilification of him.
I mean, I'm not a huge LeBron fan, but I do think it's hard to deny that he's a phenomenal basketball. And
I really don't see it. I don't see it. There's no magic there. I mean, I've seen Jordan play in the finals and regular games. That guy had magic. It was like, you could see it. You could see like, you can see the magic in the air. This guy, I don't know. He's just, I think, so full of himself. Like, I don't know. It's just, I don't want him to come to New York Knicks. I know people are talking about it. I know Cancer mentioned something. I'm sorry. No. The only person I want to come back to the New York Knicks is Patrick Ewing. That's it. To coach, not to play.
I was going to say, I don't know how much use he'll be for you right now.
Actually, you never know. He might do pretty well.
I mean, given where the Knicks are right now, that might be an upgrade, but I don't know if that's really what you're looking for. Wow. All right. Well, I don't have anything else to add other than thank you guys for tuning in for what turned into a much longer podcast than I think we intended. Why don't you send us out, John?
I will catch you guys in the next one, and we'll have some really good interviews lined up, so just stay tuned for future episodes.
Yeah, actually, I think LeBron James is going to be on our next episode, right?
I will be getting drunk like a skunk if that ever happens, because I'm going to. That's the only way I'll get through it.
Hey, LeBron, what's your favorite strategy game? All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer. You can call me Matt, with Jean, the strategy war gamer and resident LeBron hater. We're out.
Peace.